Welcome, everyone. Thanks to our guest today, Matt Curran, for joining us, and our viewers again for tuning in. Happy Friday, or happy whatever day it is you're listening to this particular recording. Today we have a unique industry role to highlight, really great for those interested in more of the business industry side of things. Matt Curran is a project manager for global strategy at Astellas company that he's been doing for a number of years. So for today, we're going to learn about Matt's role and what you might be able to do to learn more and maybe even pursue a similar career. So welcome, Matt. Appreciate you having me on.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. First question, we like to ask all of our guests basically the same thing to start, to describe your background and your path to your current role, if you could.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And so I guess we'll start at the beginning of my background. So I graduated from the University of Michigan College of Pharmacy in 1998, and had at that point I had an interest in pursuing a career in the pharmaceutical industry, but unbeknownst to me at the time, I was going about it the wrong way, and I think it's a good lesson for folks that are just starting off their career, or really at any point in their career, but especially in the beginning. Was I had a very specific interest. I had done a clerkship in regulatory affairs, and I thought that was the greatest thing ever. And so I applied for all these regulatory affairs jobs, and what I came to learn in afterwards that I wasn't applying for entry-level jobs. I was applying for, jobs that required more experience. And so needless to say, I didn't get any of those jobs and was disappointed. And so worked as a pharmacist for a couple of years, for 2 years to be exact, about a year and a half as a hospital pharmacist, and then about 6 months as a retail pharmacist. And at that time, when I switched from hospital to retail, I'd made the decision that I wanted to try again to get into industry, and kind of learning from my mistakes, applied only for entry-level jobs, looking for any job that had a minimal requirement for experience, and in some cases didn't even know what I was applying for. And so, and was lucky enough that someone at Pharmacia in Kalamazoo, Michigan, was interested in giving me an interview. So I went out for an interview, and and again, like I said, wasn't probably should have educated myself more, but wasn't entirely clear what the job actually was. To sort of skip ahead, the job that ended up being, the title was Clinical Manufacturing Coordinator, and I was in a group that was responsible for the coordination of manufacturing drug product for clinical trials. So from first-in-man studies, where you might have tens of patients, all the way up through phase 3, where you'd have thousands or tens of thousands of patients. My group that I was in was responsible for making sure that those products were made, sort of in the right quantities, and what was needed for that particular study. But in any case, as I was being interviewed, the interviewer stated to me that she says, looking at your resume, it looks like you have sterile manufacturing experience. And I was a little perplexed by that. So I basically said, I do. And she explained to me, she's like, well, you've worked in a pharmacy, right? And I said, yes. And she said, and you've made IVs in a hood, correct? And I'm like, yes. And she said, well, then you have sterile manufacturing experience. And that's what they were looking for. And so I was hired, and that was kind of, that was the beginning of what's turned into a 16-year pharmaceutical career. And Pharmacia, about 3 years later, was bought out by Pfizer, and my group was downsized. So I moved to Eli Lilly in Indianapolis, doing essentially the same work in clinical manufacturing. And so spent about 7 or 8 years in total doing that, and really enjoyed it. Got to manufacture a lot of different types of drugs, from your standard sort of tablets and capsules, to sort of more exotic things like topical foam, and sort of everywhere in between. But I towards the end of that period, period, I was not as satisfied in my career and wanted to do something different, and I wasn't too sure what that was. And so this is the other piece of advice that I would give to folks, certainly at the beginning of their career, but also throughout their career, is be open to new opportunities, and you might be pleasantly surprised. And so as I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, regulatory affairs was still in the back of my mind. I for a while, I thought I wanted to be in marketing, a bunch of different things, and I wasn't really sure. And so was on a special project, and got to know one of the people on the project was the head of a project management group, and we started getting friendly, and we'd have lunch or whatever, and kind of told him about that, not really happy in my current role and looking for something new, and he suggested to me, he's like, well, I've worked with you on this project for a while, and I think you might make a good project manager. And sort of, flashing back to, sort of 7 or 8 years prior of like not really knowing what that is, I was like, well, I'm not really sure what that is, and but it's, it sounds interesting. So he told me about project management and introduced me to some other project managers in different functional areas, and it seemed very intriguing. And so being open to something new, I went down that path, and now almost 10 years later, I can't imagine doing anything else. I really enjoy being a project manager, and have done project management for a number of different sort of functions and roles. I started off in managing clinical study programs, and then I also did some medical affairs work, and then now I'm sort of more on the commercial marketing side, and very much enjoy it. So that's kind of. And then your question about what am I doing now? So I work for Astellas Pharma. We're a Japanese-owned company. We're small to mid-sized, depending on your point of view. And I work in our what I would refer to as our global strategy group, although the actual title is global marketing strategy. But our group spends a lot of time putting the dots together, or connecting the dots, I should say, and making sure that our organization, our company, is successful when we launch a product, and making sure that it's the right product for the right customer, and the other traditional project management stuff of on time, on budget, that sort of thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a great story, Matt. Appreciate you sharing, because it follows so well with what we talk about all the time, the non-traditional pharmacist, and especially you're a great example of having a number of different careers leading up to what you're ultimately doing now. And I think that's one of the things that everyone that we talk to seems to highlight. And I love the story about the skills that they found important, the sterile prep story. That's great, because I think that also highlights the importance of sometimes people may feel like they don't have skills to do something, whereas people looking into them for potential candidates for certain careers may think the total opposite. So I think that's an important point to note too. So appreciate that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point to make. Yeah, exactly. You may have a skill that you may not even know.
Right,
that
right.
You have.
So let's talk about work-life balance for a second, because I know that's one thing going through pharmacy school and even careers post-pharmacy school. It's not really touched on all that much, but it's so important with the career that you ultimately end up doing. So if you could kind of describe your work-life balance, maybe your day-to-day schedule, and how that fits in with the rest of your life.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to do that. Yeah, no. I'll start off by saying is my work-life balance right now is great, and is what led me away from traditional pharmacy in the first place. But I'll start off with right now. I mean, my schedule. I work, basically Monday through Friday. 9 to 5, or I come in a little early and that sort of thing. But and leave a little earlier. But fairly flexible. There's some travel involved. I probably if you ask my wife, she says I travel a lot, but if you look at it, it's probably only it's probably less than once a month. 10 to 12 times a year that I'm traveling. Some international travel, which is isn't so bad. It's kind of I've gotten to go to Japan a couple of times. I've been to Europe a number of times, so it can be fun. Since I don't do it too often, but I'm able to be there. I've got a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old sons, and they both play hockey, and I'm able to see all their games and catch their practices and just really be there, and which is great. And couldn't ask for anything more. And maybe it's not everyone's experience, but when I first started off as a pharmacist, I felt it certainly wasn't like that. Working as a brand new pharmacist in a hospital, many times I worked second shift. Certainly, obviously, working holidays and weekends, and just punching a clock, and just it wasn't. After a couple of years, I didn't enjoy that. And whether this sounds elitist or arrogant or not, I was like, I didn't go to pharmacy school for 6 years and to become a doctor of pharmacy to punch a time clock.
Right.
And so that's kind of what led me away. One of the things that led me away from a traditional pharmacy role into industry. But I have really good work-life balance now.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a great setup. That's nice to hear, and I think it's encouraging to everyone considering different non-traditional roles and other career paths. You already touched on it, but what advice would you wish you had earlier in your career? You mentioned being open to new opportunities, but what advice do you wish you would have received earlier in your pharmacy career?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I get the opportunity. Ironically enough, we have a number of pharmacy students that come through our company in regulatory affairs, and I usually get an opportunity to talk with them, and share my experiences and that sort of thing. So I've kind of gotten a spiel down for them, and it's two pieces of advice that I give. One is that be open to new opportunities, but the other one is which may seem counterintuitive or mutually exclusive, is have a plan. I think have a plan, but be open to new opportunities. And the reason I say that is that early in my career, I didn't have a plan. My only plan was I want to get a raise. I want to move up to the next level. Whatever I thought better meant. And but I had no plan. I had no idea where I was going, and relatively quickly, I got very frustrated because I didn't feel like I was having, sort of professional development and that sort of thing. But again, looking with the benefit of hindsight, of course I didn't have professional development or whatever, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. So how could anyone help me? How could my boss help me? How could anyone help me? And so it wasn't until I finally, and it took me probably 7 or 8 years to really figure out what I wanted. And since then, it's not been without frustration, but it's, have an idea of where you want to be. And it doesn't have to be where do you want to be in, 5 or 10 years, but even just, next year or a couple years down the road, whatever the case may be, have some semblance of where you'd like to go. But however, be open if somebody presents an opportunity, consider that there's multiple paths to get from A to B, and maybe taking a different path might get you there faster, or it might get you there with, better prepared, or it might take you in an entirely new path that you didn't even expect, and you find that path to be even more rewarding. But if you don't have a plan in the first place, you're kind of stuck you're stuck in the same spot. So those are the two pieces of advice that I give people all the time. Have a plan, but be open to opportunities.
Great. No, that's perfect. And we've heard that before too. I think it's sometimes, I think people would say it's tough to have a plan, or at least a definitive plan, when a lot of these roles and a lot of the opportunities are changing and may not have even evolved yet. So that's where you say be open to new opportunities, and that kind of, so have a general idea of where you want to go and what you want to get out of your professional life, but also be open to that new opportunity if it arises.
Yeah, actually, that's a fantastic point. Your perfect job may not have been invented yet.
Right. Right.
And so, and in our current environment of fast pace and changes, it may get created next year or whatever. And so, be open to that. That's a great point too to add.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Matt. We appreciate you sharing all of your stories. Is there anything else you wanted to leave with people listening into the recording today?
Yeah, I guess the one thing that I didn't get a chance to add, but that I wanted to point out that, or at least what I feel is that, although again I'm doing a non-traditional pharmacy role, I feel like if 10 out of 10 times I would go do pharmacy school again, because I feel like pharmacy school really did prepare me for what I'm doing now as a project manager. And the reason I say that is, as a project manager, I think my main role is an information manager, is whether it's a timeline or a budget or some other piece of information. People come to me and, what's the submission date for this? What's the launch date for that? What's the budget for this? Who do I talk to about that? And in many cases, I don't know the answer, but I know where to get it. And I make the analogy that it's like pharmacy school. When I was in pharmacy school and as a pharmacist, people are always like, how do you keep all those drug facts straight? And the secret is we don't. But as pharmacists, we're taught to, where's the best place to go get that information? How do I get that information? And how do I judge whether that information is correct? And so those critical thinking skills really prepared me to be a project manager, to ask those same questions. All right, I don't know what the launch date for Slovakia is, but I know where to go to get it, and I know the place that's going to give me the most accurate answer. And so, even though it may not, on the surface, it may not seem like pharmacy and project management have much in common, again, I really feel that my pharmacy education prepared me really well for this role. So I just really wanted to add that.
No, that's great to hear. That's definitely great to hear. Thanks for your time and sharing your stories. We encourage everyone interested in either learning more or pursuing a career in this field to share this interview and leave us a message in the Connect section. So thanks again, Matt. We appreciate it, and we'll see everyone next time.